Have you ever felt, maybe even since you were a kid, that you were just kind of older than your age?
Hmm.
And not, smarter necessarily, but that you are carrying this quiet awareness of how things work, or that your heart just feels too big for your own life sometimes?
Too expansive.
Yes, exactly. So let's unpack that feeling, because today we're doing a deep dive into that very specific psychological and spiritual profile, the figure known as number nine.
And our sources paint a really surprisingly detailed picture of this energy.
They really do. It all centers on these core themes of universal meaning, deep compassion, this search for completion, and, well, the kind of wisdom you only get through experience.
Right.
So the mission today is to figure out why this individual, the nine, seems almost hardwired to understand suffering,
Yep.
to get the human condition, and, more importantly, why that very pursuit makes their life so rich with insight, but also so often unbelievably heavy.
And what's fascinating here is that the framework we're exploring, it immediately sets up this central tension. This isn't just a list of personality quirks.
No, not at all.
It's an existence that is inherently linked to absorption and carrying. An experience people often call, pretty accurately, the old soul phenomenon. If you've ever felt things so deeply that they don't even logically belong to you, this is going to shed some light on that.
Okay, so let's start where it all begins, right? The inner world.
Hmm.
When we look at how a nine feels inside, the first thing that jumps out is this profound emotional sensitivity.
Deep sensitivity. But the crucial part is the contrast, because externally, they can seem totally composed.
Oh, completely. They can be the calmest person in the room. The Rock.
The rock, exactly. But internally, the ocean is absolutely churning, and it's reacting to tides that are way beyond their own little boat.
And our compiled notes really get into what they're absorbing. It's so much more than just their own problems.
It really is. A nine feels, well, they feel the ambient emotional energy of other people. They can feel global suffering. They walk into a room and are just acutely aware of all the unsaid tensions, the undercurrents.
The weight of endings, too. Not just their own, but this universal sense of loss, of impermanence.
They carry the dust of every relationship they've ever even witnessed.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That deep sensitivity has to be exhausting. It must make their internal monologue just this constant engine of big questions.
That's it. The questions driving them are not trivial. They're constantly circling these huge themes of pain and purpose.
like, why does this hurt so much?
Exactly. Or why do people suffer like this? And underneath it all is that persistent driving search. There has to be more meaning than this.
That search, I think, really explains the whole feeling older than your age thing. Because if you're so tuned in to life's cycles, to loss and change being inevitable, it gives you this incredible depth.
It does, but that depth usually comes with a quiet awareness, a kind of melancholy.
Right.
Even in moments of joy, there's this undercurrent of knowing that, nothing lasts forever. And this isn't pessimism or depression. It's more of a quiet, profound acceptance that every hello implies a goodbye down the line.
So it's less about sadness and more about just this persistent awareness. That's a huge difference. And if we connect that emotional absorption to how they think, their mind must be operating on a completely different scale.
Oh, absolutely. Moving into their thought processes, the research is clear. A nine is always thinking in big pictures. Always.
They're not focused on the day-to-day logistics.
Now, unless they're forced to be. Their mind is fixed on life cycles, on moral meaning, on these long, sweeping timelines. They're looking at the moral trajectory of humanity,
Not their grocery list.
definitely not their grocery list.
Yeah.
Their natural questions are always, what does this all mean? And critically, what's the bigger lesson here?
So their mind is just constantly trying to connect all these little fragmented pieces of life back to some coherent underlying purpose. They're like pattern seekers of human existence.
Exactly, which also means certain things are incredibly frustrating to them.
Oh, I can imagine.
If you think in universal lessons, then shallow thinking, or cruelty, or purely self-centered logic, it must feel like a sharp grating sound. It just jars their entire worldview.
Because it contradicts that connection they feel is underneath everything.
Right, they're deeply intolerant of injustice, but, and this is the key, they rarely express that anger externally.
That's the catch. They feel the pain, but they just process it all inside.
They do. And this contrast is so vital for the listener to understand. To the outside world, the nine looks wise, compassionate, calm. People see this depth and they say, you're an old soul, or You're so grounded.
But the part people don't see, the crucial insight, is that invisible load. They see the calm depth, but they don't see how much the 9 is quietly carrying for everyone else. You called it a silent emotional baggage claim that they run 204/7. It's a perfect analogy.
And the problem with running that baggage claim all the time is that eventually it defines all your interactions. This inability to separate their service from their own sensitivity, it has huge implications for how they show up in the world, especially at work.
That's a perfect transition, because we've seen how deeply they feel, and that depth has to define what they do. For a 9, work can't just be a transaction.
No.
It has to feel purposeful. It's this fundamental drive of purpose over profit every single time.
It becomes a professional necessity, not just a preference. They thrive in fields that actively engage with the human condition, fostering growth, creating real meaning.
So we're talking about teaching, healing professions.
Right. Creative work, counseling, nonprofits, advocacy, writing, and this is a key, one leadership with purpose, leading people toward a shared moral goal.
But on the flip side, they really struggle in environments that violate that core need.
Deeply. Purely profit-driven roles,
Yeah.
emotionally cold workplaces, any job that feels pointless, it'll just drain them so fast. If the work doesn't connect to that bigger lesson, they burn out.
Which brings us to their famously complicated relationship with money.
Yes. Because their identity is so rooted in service and compassion, they often struggle with the whole idea of self-worth and finance. They might undervalue themselves, give too much away.
Or just avoid focusing on money at all because they feel guilty about it.
They feel genuine guilt. It's this powerful paradox. How can I focus on my own stability when I know the world is in so much pain?
Yeah.
To them, it feels like a moral failing.
Exactly. Imagine turning down a high-paying job because you felt it was fundamentally immoral to profit from a system that doesn't serve everyone. That's the internal battle.
It is. And the essential lesson they have to learn, and this is so important for you, the listener, to hear, is that stability allows service to last.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
You can't.
Yeah.
You're constantly drained or broke. Their ability to be that wise guide is cut short.
Yeah.
They have to realize that boundaries don't just apply to people, they apply to their resources too.
And shifting that to relationships, this profile loves deeply, universally. They are the friends or partners who show love through this profound understanding and radical forgiveness.
They hold space for really intense emotions.
Right.
They are the ones who often stay in difficult situations way too long, even when it hurts them.
Which brings us to the boundary issue, that challenge of letting go and choosing themselves.
That is their ultimate challenge. They stay in draining situations for far too long because, as our research shows, to them, leaving feels like abandonment.
Wow, so for a 9 who sees interconnection everywhere, choosing to separate feels like betraying the universe.
It feels like breaking the moral fabric of things.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about being nice. It becomes a real block to their own well-being. It leads straight to codependency or this quiet martyrdom.
So what happens when they get hurt by the very people they're trying so hard to hold space for?
When hurt, they internalize the pain. They get quiet. They withdraw emotionally. They can seem distant. But, and this is the critical distinction, they are still caring.
They're not indifferent.
Not at all. They just move the suffering inside rather than, expressing a need for self-protection. They'll choose silence over a confrontation that might break the connection.
And that constant absorption of pain, that naturally leads us into the shadow side. What happens when a 9 is just overwhelmed?
Right. This is where that compassionate carrying becomes a crushing weight. The shadow isn't evil. It's just their core trait. Their compassion turned toxic and self-defeating.
So when the load gets too heavy, the 9 becomes emotionally heavy, inert.
This is where service curdles into martyrdom. They start actively absorbing pain that isn't theirs, living in regret or nostalgia, and feeling hopeless about humanity because the suffering just seems too big to fix.
They feel guilty for not being able to solve the world's problems.
Yes, so their core fears are completely inverted. They're not afraid of failing themselves. They're afraid of being selfish, of letting go, of failing others.
That's the mechanism. That's how compassion turns into self-sacrifice. They lose themselves trying to save everyone else.
The transition out of that shadow, the path to becoming that healthy, mature guide, is all about redefining what true compassion means.
So the mature 9 learns to love without carrying.
Exactly. To serve without draining. To let go without guilt. They learn to accept imperfection in themselves and in the world, and they stop trying to be the savior.
And what's the ultimate realization? The moment they stop trying to rescue everyone and just find peace in their own meaning.
It's that powerful, quiet, internal shift. I can care deeply without losing myself. That's when their compassion becomes truly wise, no longer heavy or exhausting. And that's what turns them from an overwhelmed carrier into an effective guide.
And that integration is so key to their impact. Our notes say a 9 alone carries too much, but an integrated 9 becomes this constructive force in the world.
Yes. When they interact with other profiles, that wisdom they've been hiding really shines. For example, if they integrate their depth with a more action-oriented profile, their compassion actually becomes expressive. They can do something with it.
Or if they integrate with a more intellectual profile.
It generates these profound, actionable insights. They can apply their wisdom to big concepts, to real-world movements.
So they're designed to guide, but only after they've set down all that unnecessary baggage. That's the whole journey, isn't it? From carrying the load's weight to becoming that master, that wise guide.
It is. And to help anyone on that path, our research lays out 5 essential life lessons. These are the non-negotiables for this profile, the cornerstones of their transformation.
Okay, the first lesson, and this is probably the hardest for a 9 to really internalize, is that letting go is not betrayal.
Hmm. It doesn't break that universal bond they cherish. It just acknowledges where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins.
Right. And secondly, they have to learn that boundaries protect compassion.
They're not selfish walls. They're the structure that ensures your compassion doesn't just burn out into exhaustion. A boundary lets you recharge so you can come back stronger.
Okay, number 3, meaning doesn't require suffering. This one is a direct challenge to that martyr tendency.
A huge challenge. You can find purpose and depth without being the one who has to absorb all the emotional damage. Suffering can be the catalyst for wisdom, but it's not the source of it.
The fourth lesson is really a mandate for self-care. Service must include self.
If a 9 is always giving from an empty vessel, the service is unsustainable. It ends up hurting everyone. Self-care is a professional requirement for them. It truly is.
And finally, the fifth lesson, the one that gives them that lasting peace. Endings are part of wisdom.
That's the big one. Accepting the cycles of loss, of change, of letting things go, that is the very thing that informs their depth and lets them finally stop trying to hold everything and everyone together.
That shift from holding on to everything to accepting its temporary nature, that's the whole maturation process for this profile.
It fundamentally changes their relationship with service. It moves from rescue to genuine guidance.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over. If endings really are a part of wisdom, if you truly accept the temporary nature of everything, how does that transform the way you choose to serve? If you knew every relationship, every cause, every moment of joy was temporary, would your service be based on trying to rescue it all? Or would it be based on acceptance? That is the journey of the integrated 9.